Welcome to Daily Joy, where every movie is a story waiting to be relived. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe and like. Also leave a comment with the scene you like the most so I'll know to make more like it. Be aware that this video contains spoilers, so proceed with caution. A young couple, Pippa and Thomas, are shopping for their first apartment together. They discover a stunning unit in the heart of downtown Montreal and are excited to move in straight away. Getting settled in doesn't take long, and Pippa gives Thomas a fright when she mentions having kids, as they both agree it will be years before they even think about children. With that topic settled, Pippa and Thomas share a kiss and notice they have a clear view of the couple living across the street. The man is seen photographing his partner in what seems to be a professional studio, but the couple starts to become more intimate, and Pippa and Thomas keep watching. Pippa initially suggests they should respect the other couple's privacy, but Thomas argues that they likely want to be watched since the windows are uncovered and they clearly know that others can see in. At Pippa's insistence, Thomas ceases watching and heads to bed for the night. Pippa, wanting to inaugurate the new apartment, changes into some hot nightwear, but Thomas has fallen asleep by the time she joins him, leaving Pippa feeling somewhat disappointed. The next morning, Pippa heads to work as an optometrist, where she shares with her coworker, Ari, the view of their new neighbors. Ari suggests that they are likely exhibitionists, and therefore, watching them is a respectful action, but Pippa remains skeptical. Later, during lunch, Pippa's boss presents her with a bird feeder as a housewarming gift, highlighting birds' remarkable ability to see. Ari expresses her desire for a gift too, and Pippa places it outside the window immediately upon her return home. Thomas, a work-from-home sound engineer, is once more observing the neighbors, who, without actual names, are known as Margot and Brent. At that moment, Brent starts choking on something in the kitchen. He attempts to get Margot's attention, but she is focused on her work in another room with headphones on, making his efforts pointless. Pippa and Thomas observe the entire situation unfolding, and since 911 certainly won't arrive quickly enough, Thomas decides to run across the street and help. Just before he leaves, Brent gets Margot's attention by banging on the window, which only makes the problem worse when Margot doesn't know how to help him. She ultimately discovers the solution and clears Brent's airway, while Pippa and Thomas joyfully cheer them on from the window. That night, Pippa wakes up to get a drink of water and sees Brent saying goodbye to Margot, who appears to be leaving town. Pippa stops to appreciate Brent's physique, ceasing only when he seems to check up and notice her, leading Pippa to let her glass fall to the floor. Initially against spying on their neighbors, Pippa halts on her way home to purchase a pair of binoculars. Brent, now home alone with Margot out of town, invites a beautiful female model into his apartment for a late-night photo shoot. After enjoying some wine, Brent lightens the mood by taking off his shirt, and his houseguest joins in. Pippa, noticing this, starts taking off Thomas's clothes, and they soon become occupied right there in the living room while Pippa continues to observe through the binoculars. Just as she is getting into it, Thomas finishes early, but Pippa covers up her frustration until Thomas exits the room, granting her the chance to keep spying on Brent. The following day at lunch, Margot and Brent continue to be the topic of the day. Thomas suggests the idea that they might be swingers, but Pippa informs him that no one uses that term anymore. Ari searches online and finds that 15% of couples are in open relationships, and Pippa wishes they could listen to what the other couple is saying. It appears that Thomas has discovered a technique of listening in from afar and has acquired this skill during his college years. Pippa insists on hearing more, so Thomas describes, sound waves generate vibrations on glass surfaces, which can be captured and transmitted using a laser pointer and then converted back into sound. To achieve this undetected, however, would necessitate a reflective surface to be placed in the other apartment in such a manner that directs the laser beam straight back to its source. By chance, Brent and Margot are hosting a Halloween party, giving Pippa and Thomas the ideal opportunity to sneak in. They wore costumes that hid their faces and followed other partygoers onto the elevator, determined to carry out their highly illegal plan. Within the party, Thomas and Pippa experience some intriguing interactions with both of the hosts. Initially, they're interrupted by Brent, who is capturing the event, but he finds their pose choice boring. He approaches Pippa, stares deeply into her eyes but remains silent, and lifts her leg to create a more provocative photo. Afterwards, Margot stops to take a pull of Thomas's cigarette, ironically dressed as Margot Tenenbaum for her costume. Now feeling assured they won't be revealed as party crashers, Pippa and Thomas have a wonderful time for a while, but Pippa remains focused on their purpose and places a small mirror in the apartment, using her chewing gum as adhesive. Back at their own apartment, Pippa uses the binoculars to guide Thomas to the mirror, then locates the reflected laser beam by clapping two erasers together, amazing her boyfriend. After some fine-tuning by Thomas to isolate the voices, their plan proves successful, and they can clearly eavesdrop on Margot and Brent's conversation. Margot and Brent's marital problems are revealed, with Margot accusing her husband of cheating while she was out of town. Brent, however, is a skilled manipulator and shifts the blame back onto Margot, implying that she has fallen out of love with him and wants to convince herself that he is unfaithful because she is unable to convince herself to just leave him. The strategy is effective. Margot feels guilty and apologizes, however, Brent continues on. He holds Margot strongly and violently forces her head down, ruining her eyeglasses in the process. The following day at work, Pippa sits in her office having a brutal hangover and is taken aback by the sight of Margot walking into l'optique. Margot, whose real name is Julia, has come to replace her glasses, but her prescription is several years outdated, so Pippa fits her in for an eye exam as well. After updating Julia's prescription and determining that her vision is terrible, the two women enjoy a delightful time together picking out new frames, ultimately agreeing on the femme fatale style that Pippa suggests. Julia and Pippa get along so well that Julia asks Pippa to hang out sometime, and Pippa agrees, still keeping the fact that they're next-door neighbors a secret. While Julia is away, Brent's sexual pursuits persist, charming another model at the end of their photo shoot. Even though the woman initially pushes him away, Brent remains persistent with his charm, and they ultimately connect, diverting Thomas from his work. That evening, Pippa and Thomas share stories about their day, pondering what the odds were of Julia selecting Pippa's office for her glasses. The tone of the conversation shifts when Pippa discloses their plan to meet up over the weekend, prompting Thomas to object on the grounds that the intrusion has already gone too far. Pippa asserts her moral superiority by claiming she has a duty to expose Brent's infidelity, a move that further infuriates Thomas. For Thomas, moving in together represented taking the next step in their own relationship, and he wonders if he's somehow not enough for Pippa, but she dismisses his concerns, unwilling to let it go. Thomas insists it's none of their business, that Julia is an adult who doesn't need saving, then storms out of the apartment in anger. Unbothered by Thomas's feelings on the matter, Pippa meets Julia that weekend, and they spend the afternoon indulging themselves at a day spa. Brent, whose real name is Sebastian or Seb, is a highly skilled photographer, regarded as a genius in his field. Julia was a model, and she admits that even though they met and slept together after a photo shoot, it developed into a significant relationship and ultimately marriage, and Seb now means everything to her. Julia frequently discusses her husband, emphasizing his sexual prowess, which leaves Pippa uncertain about disclosing his secret. This confusion leads her to mistakenly refer to Julia as Margot. After hearing Julia's description, Pippa becomes fixated on Seb's life, hiding the binoculars every time Thomas is nearby and using headphones so that he doesn't catch her eavesdropping. One afternoon, Pippa observes Seb engaging in a threesome with two female models. Pippa, seizing an opportunity, waits for Julia to return home and exposes Seb by sending a message to their wireless printer. The initial message states, "Your husband is cheating on you," but Pippa continues further. To confirm the accusation, she follows with a second message stating, "The used condom is in the bathroom trash." As Pippa waits for Julia to read the second printout, Thomas catches her in the act and once more confronts her about the spying. Observing Pippa's unusual behavior, Thomas inquires about what she has done as Julia reads the second printout. After confirming that Seb has already fallen asleep, Julia checks the bathroom trash and verifies the message was accurate. After breaking down crying, Julia walks slowly to the kitchen, where she retrieves a large chef's knife. Julia then makes her way to the bedroom, where Thomas picks up the phone to call the police. However, Pippa stops him, solely concerned about the potential consequences for herself, and yells at Thomas. Julia lowers the knife to stab her husband but halts just before doing so. Relieved, yet still furious with his girlfriend, Thomas grabs the binoculars and hurls them to the ground, shattering one of the glass lenses. Thomas and Pippa rise early the next morning and talk about progressing in their own relationship. Their thoughts are interrupted, however, when they see Julia in the window, covered in blood with Seb trying to revive her, seemingly having turned the knife on herself. Pippa picks up the binoculars to take a closer look, but Thomas can't handle it any longer. He prepares a bag to go at his sister, constantly holding Pippa responsible for everything that has occurred. Thomas emphasizes that he asked Pippa to stop, but Pippa ignored his request, leading to Julia's death. There's nothing more to do since Pippa ended Julia's life. Thomas then ends things with Pippa and angrily leaves the apartment. Even with the tragic loss of life, Pippa keeps watching Seb as he mourns, sometimes even picturing herself by Seb's side, comforting him. When Seb goes to keep drinking his sorrows away at the nearby bar, Pippa follows him there, and they find themselves engaged in conversation. Seb expresses regret for some blunt moments in the dialogue, sharing that he's currently experiencing a very difficult separation. They finish their cocktails, and Pippa agrees to be photographed at Seb's apartment, which he notes is just one building away. Pippa begins by posing shirtless, but ultimately takes off all of her clothes and goes on to have sex with Seb. Meanwhile, Thomas returns to their apartment with flowers in hand, eager to reconcile with Pippa. When Thomas discovers the apartment empty, he drinks one of the green juices from the refrigerator, but finds it disgusting. He then pours most of the juice into the bird feeder, where he spots Pippa having a romantic moment with Seb. After spending the night in Seb's bed, Pippa departs early the next morning to hide the truth that they are neighbors. She returns home and is shocked to find Thomas there, having already done the unimaginable. Soon after the funeral ceremonies, Pippa seeks solace in her friend Ari, but the conversation inevitably circles back to Seb, particularly how Pippa can reunite with him once more. Ari is surprised by this, but Pippa recalls seeing an ad for Seb's art exhibition, so she invites Ari to join her there. The exhibition opens in a solemn atmosphere, with Seb contemplating the love of his life, Julia. Upon hearing this, Pippa suddenly feels the urge to leave, but she reconsiders when Julia appears from the crowd, very much alive, and confidently joins Seb on stage. The surprises keep coming as Pippa's candid photo is uncovered, showing that she is the subject of the exhibition. Seb and Julia are the owners of the apartment that Pippa is renting, and the lease contains a clause that consents to being photographed. Seb and Julia continue to narrate that the entire time they were aware of being watched, they were simultaneously observing Thomas and Pippa. Pippa, clearly horrified after being exposed, runs out of the exhibition. Instead of returning home, Pippa breaks into Seb's apartment and vandalizes his private studio, which contains multiple cameras connected to automated recording equipment and the walls covered in photos of Pippa and Thomas. The exhibit's controversial nature draws worldwide interest, making Seb and Julia a highly sought-after interview. Meanwhile, Pippa gathers her belongings from the apartment, pausing to observe the dead birds as she picks up the bird feeder. Later, Seb and Julia come home to discover a congratulatory bottle of wine waiting for them. They quickly break it open and start toasting to their success when Pippa sends another printed message accusing the couple of killing Thomas. Seb picks up a camera lens and spots Pippa observing from the roof of the adjacent building. He calls out to her, but Pippa takes off running, and they choose to follow her, ultimately ending up back at L'Optique. Pippa accuses Julia of murder, suggesting that while Pippa was getting busy with Seb, Julia snuck into their apartment, poisoned Thomas's juice, then staged the scene to make it look like self-harm. Even with her elaborate theory, Pippa acknowledges that she has no evidence to back up any of the allegations. However, Pippa discloses that she had drugged the special bottle of wine, which takes effect during the conversation and renders both Seb and Julia unconscious. Pippa then operates the LASIK machine on her neighbors, blinding them by scorching their corneas with the laser. A new couple has moved into the vacant apartment some time later. From her rooftop perch, Pippa watches as the new tenants peer out the window and see the now blind Seb and Julia across the street. One of the men remarks that they ought to mind their own business, as Pippa leaves her pair of binoculars behind. Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like, share and subscribe button to my channel to see more videos like this.